I watched my career crumble in real time as my boss stammered through my termination, meeting his hands shaking while his 23-year-old son smirked from the corner office. 3 years of dedication, countless late nights building campaigns that doubled our revenue, all destroyed because I refused to let some spoiled brat dictate my marketing strategies. But as Frank reached for the severance papers, I smiled and said those magic words that would change everything. What happened next exposed corruption so deep it made national headlines and left that entitled family begging for mercy they would never receive. My name is Victoria, and 3 years ago I walked into Harrison Industries as a junior marketing associate with nothing but ambition and a degree from Ohio State. The manufacturing company specialized in industrial equipment, and frankly, their marketing was stuck in 1995. Fax machine campaigns and Yellow Pages ads were their cutting edge strategies. I transformed that department completely. Within 18 months, I launched our first digital presence, created targeted campaigns that spoke directly to our industrial clients, and developed partnerships that brought in contracts worth over $2 million. My social media strategy alone increased brand awareness by 300%. Frank Harrison, the company owner, promoted me to marketing director before my second anniversary. Frank was a decent man in his early 60s who had built Harrison Industries from nothing after his wife died 15 years earlier. He worked 18-hour days and genuinely cared about his 120 employees. The problem was his son Bradley, who returned from his expensive MBA program with an attitude that could poison water and zero understanding of actual business operation. Bradley strutted around the office like he owned the place, which technically he would someday. 23 years old, perfectly styled hair, designer suits that cost more than most employees made in a month. He had never worked a real job in his life, never faced actual consequences, never been told no by anyone except maybe his credit card company. My assistant Sarah and I were preparing for the biggest client presentation of the quarter when Bradley burst through my office door without knocking. Sarah looked up from her laptop, startled by the sudden intrusion. "We need to talk," Bradley announced, not bothering with pleasantries. His voice carried that particular tone of someone who had never been denied anything important. "Good morning to you too, Bradley," I replied, not looking up from the presentation slides. "Sarah and I are preparing for the Johnson Industries meeting. Can this wait until this afternoon?" "No, it cannot wait." Bradley moved to the center of my office, positioning himself between my desk and the door like he was establishing dominance. "I just reviewed your advertising budget for next quarter, and there are some major changes we need to make." Sarah gave me a look that said, "Here we go again," and quietly saved her work. She had witnessed enough of these encounters to know they rarely ended well. "What kind of changes?" I asked, finally giving him my attention while keeping my voice professional. Bradley pulled out his phone and started reading from notes. "First, cancel the trade magazine campaign. Complete waste of money. Second, cut the digital advertising budget by 60%. Third, I want you to allocate $50,000 for influencer partnerships." I stared at him for a moment, processing what he had just said. "Bradley, the trade magazine campaign generates 40% of our qualified leads. The digital advertising brings in our highest converting prospects, and influencer partnerships make 0 cents for industrial equipment sales. That shows how behind the times your thinking is," Bradley said, his voice getting louder. "Influencers are the future. My MBA program covered all the latest trends. Social media influencers can reach millions of potential customers." "What kind of influencers exactly?" I asked, genuinely curious about his logic. "Fashion bloggers, gaming streamers, food reviewers. Our customers are purchasing managers at manufacturing companies, not teenagers following lifestyle brands." Bradley's face flushed red. "You are completely missing the point. It is about brand awareness and reaching new demographics. My generation understands marketing better than your outdated approaches." Sarah cleared her throat softly. "Victoria, should I step out for a few minutes?" "No, Sarah, please stay," I said firmly. Bradley, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but these decisions affect real revenue and real jobs. The Johnson Industries contract alone is worth $400,000, and they specifically mentioned our trade publication ads as the reason they wanted to meet with us. That is exactly the problem, Bradley snapped. You are too focused on these boring old companies. We need to think bigger, reach younger decision makers who appreciate innovation. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Can you show me market research supporting influencer marketing for B2B industrial sales? Any case studies or data that demonstrate ROI in our sector? I do not need to justify my decisions to you, Bradley said, his voice rising to nearly a shout. My father owns this company, and that means I have authority here. When I tell you to do something, you do it. No questions, no pushback, no lectures about your precious data. Bradley, I respect your position in this company, I replied, keeping my tone steady. But I have a responsibility to protect our marketing investments and deliver results for our clients. These campaigns took months to develop and are producing measurable outcomes. Measurable outcomes, Bradley repeated mockingly. You sound like every other corporate drone who is afraid to take risks. This is why companies like ours get left behind while startups disrupt entire industries. Sarah was typing furiously, and I realized she was documenting this conversation. Smart woman. What startups are disrupting industrial equipment manufacturing? I asked. Can you name specific companies that used influencer marketing to capture market share from established manufacturers? Bradley's jaw clenched. You are deliberately missing the point because you cannot handle having your authority questioned. This is about innovation and forward thinking, not your narrow little world of spreadsheets and boring statistics. My narrow little world generated 68% revenue growth last year, I said calmly. These boring statistics represent real money that pays real salaries for real families. And that attitude right there is the problem, Bradley said, pointing an accusatory finger at me. You think you are indispensable because you had one good year, but this company existed before you got here and it will exist after you leave. The threat was clear, but I refused to back down. You are absolutely right that the company existed before me. It also had declining sales, no digital presence, and was losing market share to competitors. The strategies we implemented reversed those trends. Bradley pulled out his phone and started recording. I want you to repeat what you just said about questioning my authority and refusing to implement my marketing strategy. I never said I was questioning your authority, I replied, noticing how carefully he was positioning his phone. I explained why canceling successful campaigns would hurt our revenue and our clients. Same thing, Bradley snapped. You are being insubordinate and disrespectful. My father needs to know how you really feel about taking direction from the Harrison family. Sarah's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. Bradley was creating evidence, but not the kind that would tell the whole story. Bradley, I think there might be some misunderstanding here, I said, trying to de-escalate. Why do not we schedule a proper meeting with your father where we can review all the campaign data together? I can show you exactly how each strategy performs, and we can discuss modifications that make sense for our business goals. There is no misunderstanding, Bradley said, still recording. Either you follow my directions or you can find another job. Those are your options. He stopped recording and left my office without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the framed certificates on my wall. Sarah waited 30 seconds before speaking. Please tell me you recorded that too. I did not, but I should have, I admitted. He was definitely planning something with that recording session. The way he positioned his phone, he was only capturing your voice, not his, Sarah observed. And he kept goading you to respond while he was recording. I sat back in my chair, feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. He's going to edit that recording and play it for his father. What are you going to do? Document everything, I said, opening a new file on my computer, starting right now. Within an hour, Frank Harrison called requesting a meeting for later that week. His voice sounded different, distant, and formal. When I walked past his office that afternoon, I saw him listening to something on his computer with a deeply troubled expression. The change in Frank's demeanor was immediate and unsettling. For 3 years, he had greeted me warmly each morning, asked about my weekend plans, and genuinely celebrated our marketing victories. Suddenly, he barely made eye contact and spoke to me only when absolutely necessary. Sarah noticed it too. He walked past your office 3 times yesterday without stopping to chat, she told me during our morning coffee. Usually, he cannot wait to hear about our latest campaign results. I decided to take action instead of waiting for whatever Bradley had planned. My first call was to Janet Murphy, the former HR director who had left Harrison Industries 6 months earlier under circumstances that nobody discussed openly. Janet agreed to meet me for lunch at a small cafe 20 minutes from the office. She looked tired but relieved to be away from the company, and her first words confirmed my suspicions. Bradley Harrison is a nightmare, she said without preamble. I spent my last 8 months at Harrison Industries trying to document his behavior and protect other employees from his retaliation. What kind of retaliation? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. He targets anyone who challenges him or refuses to enable his schemes, Janet explained. David Kim in sales questioned some of Bradley's expense reports last year. Within 2 weeks, Bradley convinced his father that David was not a team player. David got demoted from senior sales manager to regular sales rep and lost $15,000 in annual salary. My stomach dropped. David Kim was one of our most ethical employees, a 38-year-old family man who had been with the company for 12 years. What about you? What happened that made you leave? Janet stirred her soup, slowly choosing her words carefully. Bradley submitted expense reports for business trips that were actually personal vacations. Las Vegas, Miami, Los Angeles. He would claim he was meeting with potential clients or attending industry conferences, but when I investigated, there were no legitimate business purposes. How much money are we talking about? Over the 6 months before I left, he filed for reimbursement on $43,000 worth of personal expenses. Hotel suites, expensive restaurants, designer shopping car rentals for luxury vehicles. All of it charged to the company. I felt sick. Did you report this to Frank? I tried, Janet said sadly. I presented the evidence to Frank, but Bradley had already convinced him that I was overstepping my authority and harassing him. Frank told me that family matters were not my concern and that I needed to focus on regular HR duties. So you resigned. I was given the choice to resign quietly or be terminated for insubordination, Janet said bitterly. I needed the reference for my next job, so I took the resignation. After lunch, I reached out to David Kim. He was hesitant to meet, but eventually agreed to talk during his lunch break. We sat in his car in the parking lot of a grocery store, and his story was even worse than I expected. Bradley was furious when I asked questions about his expense reports. David told me, I was just doing my job, making sure all the receipts matched our reimbursement policies. But he acted like I was personally attacking him. What kind of expenses were you questioning? $3,000 dinners for supposed client meetings, but when I called the restaurants, they had no record of any business discussions. $5,000 hotel bills for one-night stays in cities where we have no prospects. Car service charges of $800 for trips to shopping centers and entertainment districts. David looked exhausted just talking about it. When I brought this to Frank's attention, Bradley told his father that I was being hostile and undermining family relationships. Frank called me in and said I was no longer a good fit for senior management. How much money did you lose? The demotion cost me $15,000 in salary, plus I lost my performance bonuses. With 3 kids and a mortgage, it has been devastating. I asked David if he would be willing to help me document Bradley's behavior, and he agreed immediately. I have been keeping copies of everything, he admitted. Receipts, emails, expense reports. I knew something like this might happen again. My next conversation was with Tom Rodriguez, our chief financial officer. Tom was 55 years old, had been with the company for 8 years, and had a reputation for absolute integrity. I trusted him more than anyone else at Harrison Industries. Can I speak with you confidentially? I asked, closing his office door. Of course, Victoria. What is on your mind? I told Tom about my confrontation with Bradley and the information I had learned from Janet and David. Tom listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. I have been concerned about some financial irregularities, Tom admitted when I finished. Bradley's expense reports have raised red flags, but every time I try to investigate, Frank tells me to approve them without question. What kind of irregularities? Tom pulled out a locked filing cabinet and removed a manila folder. Bradley has submitted expense reports totaling $78,000 over the past year. Many of the expenses cannot be verified as legitimate business costs. He showed me photocopies of receipts and credit card statements, five-star hotel suites in vacation destinations, $1,000 dinners at celebrity chef restaurants, shopping sprees at luxury boutiques, car rentals for high-end sports cars. This receipt is for a weekend in the Bahamas, Tom said, pointing to a hotel bill. Bradley claimed it was an industry conference, but I cannot find any conference that took place there during those dates. Have you talked to Frank about this? I tried, but Frank becomes defensive whenever I raise questions about Bradley's expenses. He says his son is networking and building relationships that will benefit the company long term. Tom closed the folder and looked at me seriously. Victoria, I think Bradley is systematically stealing from this company, and anyone who threatens to expose him gets eliminated. What can we do? We need irrefutable evidence, Tom said. Documentation that even Frank cannot ignore or explain away. That evening, I started building a comprehensive file. Sarah helped me organize everything we had documented about Bradley's behavior, including timestamps, witness accounts, and copies of all relevant communications. Lisa Thompson from accounting contacted me the next day. She had heard through office gossip that I was asking questions about Bradley's expenses. I have been tracking some unusual patterns, Lisa told me during a private meeting in the parking garage. Bradley's credit card charges often occur on weekends and in locations that have nothing to do with our business operations. Lisa was 34 years old, incredibly detail-oriented, and had been with Harrison Industries for 6 years. If she said there were unusual patterns, I believed her. Can you show me what you found? Lisa opened her laptop and showed me a spreadsheet she had created. This credit card charge is for $2,000 at a high-end clothing store in Chicago. Bradley claimed it was for professional attire for client meetings, but the receipt shows he purchased casual designer jeans and sneakers. She scrolled through dozens of similar examples. Spa treatments, luxury car detailing, expensive electronics, premium liquor purchases, all of it categorized as business expenses and reimbursed by the company. How much money total? In the past 18 months, approximately $120,000 in questionable expenses, Lisa said, and that is just what I can track through his corporate credit card. By the end of the week, I had assembled a team of employees who were all concerned about Bradley's behavior and its impact on the company. We had documentation witnesses and a clear pattern of financial misconduct. But I also knew that Frank was preparing to take action against me based on whatever Bradley had told him. Time was running out. With Tom's help, I developed a systematic approach to gathering irrefutable evidence of Bradley's corruption. We needed documentation that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away, even by a father desperate to protect his son. Our breakthrough came through Amanda Foster, the IT security specialist. Amanda was 29 years old, brilliant with computers, and had recently noticed some unusual system access patterns that troubled her. Bradley has been accessing files outside his authorization level, Amanda told Tom and me during a clandestine meeting in the server room. Employee salary information, confidential client contracts, financial reports that are supposed to be restricted to senior management only. Amanda showed us her computer logs. He is using his father's login credentials to access these files, probably because Frank gave him the password, but he is downloading information that has nothing to do with any legitimate business purpose. What kind of information specifically, I asked. Client contact lists, pricing strategies, proprietary manufacturing processes, employee performance reviews. He downloaded the entire customer database 3 times last month. Tom and I exchanged glances. Why would he need customer contact information? That is what worried me, Amanda said. So I started monitoring his email traffic. This is what I found. She opened another file showing email communications between Bradley and several external email addresses. The content made my blood run cold. He has been selling our client information to competitors, Amanda said quietly. Look at these emails. The evidence was devastating. Bradley had been providing detailed client lists, pricing information, and contract terms to 3 different competing companies. In exchange, he received payments totaling $75,000 over 6 months. This is corporate espionage, Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. Bradley is literally selling out his father's company for personal profit. Amanda nodded grimly. It gets worse. He has been sharing false information about our production capabilities, making us look unreliable to potential clients. 2 major contracts we lost last quarter were directly related to information he provided to competitors. I felt sick thinking about Frank's reaction when he learned the truth. Can you document all of this? Already done, Amanda said, handing me a flash drive. Screenshots, email records, financial transaction records, system access logs. Everything is timestamped and verified. But we needed one more piece of evidence, something that would catch Bradley in the act and eliminate any possible deniability. I devised a trap using my marketing background. I created a fictional client called Midwest Manufacturing Solutions, complete with fake contact information and a fabricated project proposal. The proposal involved a lucrative contract for specialized industrial equipment, exactly the kind of opportunity that would tempt Bradley. Sarah helped me create realistic-looking documents including fake letterhead project specifications and budget information. We made sure the information was detailed enough to be valuable but completely fictitious. During a department meeting, I casually mentioned the new prospect to the team, making sure Bradley overheard. Midwest Manufacturing is considering a major equipment upgrade, I said loud enough for him to hear. They are looking at a $2 million purchase over the next 6 months. Bradley's eyes lit up immediately. After the meeting, he approached me with fake enthusiasm. That Midwest manufacturing opportunity sounds promising, he said. Can you send me the details? I might have some contacts who could help us close that deal. Absolutely, I replied, pretending to be pleased by his interest. I will email you the proposal documents this afternoon. Within 2 hours of sending Bradley the fake information, Amanda confirmed that he had forwarded the documents to 2 different competitor email addresses. He is asking for $15,000 in exchange for the client contact information and project specifications, Amanda told me, showing me the intercepted emails. How long before he realizes it is fake? Hopefully not until after he receives payment, Amanda said. The email addresses he is using belong to purchasing managers at legitimate companies. They will eventually figure out the information is false, but by then, we will have documented evidence of his attempted sale. 3 days later, our trap worked perfectly. Bradley received payment of $15,000 for the fake client information, and Amanda captured screenshots of the entire transaction. He just deposited the money into his personal bank account, she reported. We have emails, bank records, and system access logs proving he stole and sold company information. Meanwhile, Frank's behavior toward me continued to deteriorate. He excluded me from management meetings, questioned my decisions publicly, and gave me formal warnings about attitude problems that Bradley had reported. Victoria, I need to speak with you, Frank said on Friday afternoon, his tone cold and official. In his office, Frank looked uncomfortable but determined. I have received multiple reports about your resistance to new marketing strategies and disrespectful behavior toward family members of this company. I knew this was Bradley's edited recording, but I remained calm. Frank, can you be specific about what behaviors you find concerning? I want to understand exactly what I have done wrong. Frank played the doctored audio recording. As I suspected, it only contained my voice, responding to Bradley's demands with all of his threats and unreasonable requests edited out. Without context, it sounded like I was being stubborn and insubordinate. This is extremely disappointing, Victoria, Frank said after the recording ended. Bradley tells me you refuse to consider innovative marketing approaches and that you questioned his authority in front of other employees. Frank, I would like you to hear my perspective on that conversation, I said carefully. There may be some context missing from that recording. I do not think additional context is necessary, Frank replied. This is a formal warning. Any further incidents of this nature will result in immediate termination. As I left Frank's office, I knew Bradley was moving in for the kill, but I also knew we had everything we needed to expose the truth. Tom, Amanda, Sarah, and I spent the weekend organizing our evidence into a comprehensive presentation. Bank records, email communication system access logs, forged expense reports, and recordings of Bradley's threats to other employees. When we present this to Frank, it needs to be absolutely overwhelming, Tom said. Bradley has spent months poisoning his father's opinion of you. This evidence has to be so clear that Frank cannot ignore it. What if Frank chooses to protect his son anyway? Sarah asked. Then we take it to the authorities, I said grimly. Corporate fraud, theft, espionage, these are federal crimes. Frank will not have a choice. By Monday morning, we were ready. I prepared an email containing all our evidence and scheduled it to send to Frank's inbox at precisely the moment Bradley would be demanding my termination. The final confrontation was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Bradley strutted into the office wearing his most expensive suit, clearly preparing for what he expected to be my final day at Harrison Industries. He made a show of walking past my office multiple times, smirking each time he caught my eye. Sarah was nervous, but I felt strangely calm. 3 months of careful documentation and evidence gathering had led to this moment. Either justice would prevail or we would take everything to the FBI. There was no middle ground left. At 10:30, Frank's assistant called my extension. Victoria, Mr. Harrison would like to see you in his office immediately. This is it, Sarah whispered. Are you ready? As ready as I will ever be, I replied, checking my phone to confirm the email was scheduled to send in 15 minutes. Frank's office felt different when I walked in. The usual warmth was completely gone, replaced by an atmosphere of formal disappointment. Frank sat behind his desk, looking genuinely pained while Bradley stood near the window with barely contained glee. Victoria, please sit down, Frank said, without looking at me directly. This is one of the most difficult conversations I have ever had to have with an employee. I understand this is difficult, Frank, I replied, keeping my voice steady and professional. Bradley moved closer to his father's desk, positioning himself where he could watch my reaction. Dad, just get this over with. She has been a problem for months and everyone knows it. Frank winced at his son's harsh tone, but continued. Victoria, over the past few months, I have received multiple reports about your performance and attitude, resistance to new ideas, disrespectful behavior toward management, and an unwillingness to adapt to changing business strategies. Frank, before you continue, I wonder if you could check your email, I said calmly. I sent you something this morning that might provide important context for this conversation. Bradley's head snapped toward me. Dad, do not let her manipulate you with more excuses. You have already made your decision. What kind of context? Frank asked, his hand hovering over his computer mouse. Information that I believe every business owner should know about their company's financial security and employee behavior, I said. It will only take a few minutes to review. Bradley stepped forward aggressively. This is exactly what I am talking about. She cannot accept responsibility for her own behavior, so she tries to deflect and create distractions. Frank looked between his son and me, clearly torn. Victoria, I appreciate that you want to explain your side, but I have already reviewed all the relevant information. Have you reviewed Bradley's expense reports for the past 18 months? I asked. Or his email communications with competing companies? Or his unauthorized access to confidential client files? The color drained from Bradley's face. What are you talking about, Dad? She is making false accusations because she knows she is about to be fired. Frank, please check your email, I said again, my voice firm but respectful. What I have sent you involves potential criminal activity that affects the entire company. Frank clicked on his email inbox and found my message. The subject line read, Critical information regarding corporate security and financial misconduct. Immediate attention required. Do not open that, Bradley said quickly. She is trying to save her job by spreading lies about me. Frank looked at his son with growing confusion. If these are lies, then opening the email will prove that immediately. Dad, this is ridiculous, Bradley said, his voice rising. You are letting an employee manipulate you instead of supporting your own family. Frank opened the email and began reading. I had written a brief summary explaining that the attached documents contained evidence of theft, corporate espionage, and fraud affecting Harrison Industries. The email was professional, factual, and devastating. Frank's expression changed as he scrolled through the attachments. Bank records showing unexplained deposits into Bradley's personal accounts. Screenshots of emails offering to sell client information to competitors. Credit card statements for personal expenses charged to the company. System access logs proving unauthorized data theft. What is this? Frank asked quietly, his voice barely audible. Bradley moved behind his father's chair, trying to see the computer screen. Dad, whatever she is showing you, it is fake. She probably created those documents to frame me. Frank continued reading in silence. Amanda had organized the evidence chronologically, making it impossible to miss the patterns. Each piece of evidence connected to the next building an overwhelming case of systematic corruption. Bradley, can you explain these bank deposits? Frank asked, pointing to his screen. $15,000 from Meridian Manufacturing, $12,000 from Industrial Solutions Group, $8,000 from Precision Equipment Company. Those are consulting fees, Bradley said quickly. I have been doing freelance work in my spare time. For our competitors, Frank asked, his voice getting stronger. They are not really competitors, Dad, more like potential partners. I was exploring collaborative opportunities. Frank opened the email screenshots showing Bradley offering to sell Harrison Industries client lists and pricing information. His hands began shaking as he read his son's words describing their family business as easy to exploit and their employees as clueless. What collaborative opportunities involve selling our customer database? Frank asked, his voice now cold and hard. Bradley's confident facade began cracking. Dad, you do not understand the context of those emails. This woman has been trying to undermine me since day one, and now she is twisting legitimate business communications to make me look bad. Frank opened the expense report analysis that Tom had prepared. $78,000 in fraudulent reimbursements over 18 months. Hotel bills for personal vacations. Shopping sprees charged as business expenses. Car rentals for luxury vehicles used for weekend entertainment. Bradley, this shows you charged the company for a weekend in Miami, Frank said, his voice trembling with rage. You told me you were visiting a manufacturing conference. I was networking, Bradley insisted. All successful business people invest in relationships and personal branding. Frank's voice exploded with fury. Personal branding. You spent $3,000 company dollars on designer clothes and called it professional attire. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Amanda's system logs proved Bradley had stolen confidential information. The bank records proved he had sold that information to competitors. The expense reports proved he had been stealing money for personal use. Dad, you have to choose, Bradley said desperately. Are you going to believe your own son or some employee who is trying to destroy our family? Frank stood up slowly, his face flushed with anger and heartbreak. I am going to believe the evidence, Bradley. Financial records do not lie. Bank statements do not have agendas. You have been stealing from this company and selling information to our competitors. Everything I did was for the good of the company, Bradley shouted. You are too old-fashioned to understand modern business strategies. Modern business strategies do not include theft and espionage, Frank said, his voice deadly quiet. You betrayed this company, you betrayed our employees, and you betrayed me. Bradley's desperation turned to rage. Fine, yes, I took money from the company, but it is my inheritance anyway, and yes, I sold information to competitors, but only because you refused to modernize our approach. This whole business is stuck in the past, and I was trying to position us for the future. By destroying us, Frank asked incredulously. By taking control before you run everything into the ground, Bradley screamed. I am tired of pretending to respect your outdated methods. I am tired of watching you treat employees like they matter more than family. This company belongs to me, and I was just accelerating the timeline. The mask was completely off now. Bradley's true feelings about his father, the company, and everyone who worked there were fully exposed. Frank sat down heavily, looking like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Victoria, I owe you an enormous apology, and I owe this company protection from someone who has been systematically destroying it. Dad, you cannot be serious, Bradley said, panic replacing his anger. You are going to side with her over your own son. I am going to side with the truth, Frank said sadly. And the truth is that you have committed crimes against this company and everyone who works here. Frank picked up his phone and dialed a number. Amanda, can you come to my office immediately and please ask Tom Rodriguez to join us? When Amanda and Tom arrived, Frank's voice was steady but broken. I have reviewed the evidence you collected, and I am contacting the authorities immediately. Bradley will be terminated effective immediately, and we will cooperate fully with any criminal investigation. You cannot do this to me, Bradley said, his voice cracking with disbelief. I am your son. You are my son, and I love you, Frank said, tears forming in his eyes. But I cannot protect you from the consequences of criminal behavior. Bradley made one final desperate attempt to regain control. If you do this, I will destroy you. I will go to the media, tell them how you enabled my behavior, make you look like a fool who could not control his own company. Frank stood up and walked to his office door. Security, please escort Bradley Harrison from the building immediately. He is no longer employed here and is not permitted on company property. As security arrived, Bradley's arrogance finally collapsed into the reality of his situation. Dad, please, we can work this out privately. I will pay back the money. You will pay back every penny, Frank said firmly, but you will do it through the legal system, not through family negotiations. Bradley was escorted from the building while the entire office watched in stunned silence. Frank returned to his office and immediately began making phone calls to report the crimes to appropriate authorities. The son who had expected to inherit a company had instead destroyed his relationship with his father and faced federal criminal charges. Justice was finally beginning. Within hours of Bradley's removal from the building, Frank contacted the FBI's Corporate Fraud Division and the Ohio State Attorney General's office. Special Agent Maria Santos arrived at Harrison Industries the following morning with a team of federal investigators who transformed our conference room into a temporary command center. Agent Santos was a sharp professional woman in her early 40s who specialized in corporate espionage and financial crimes. She reviewed our evidence with the focused intensity of someone who had seen every type of business fraud imaginable. This is one of the most comprehensive evidence packages I have ever received from a private company, Agent Santos told Frank, Tom, Amanda, and me during our initial interview. Your documentation is thorough, well-organized, and legally admissible. The federal investigation moved quickly. Amanda provided complete digital forensics, including Bradley's email communication system, access logs, and financial transaction records. Tom supplied detailed financial analysis showing exactly how much money Bradley had stolen and which competitors had paid him for information. The scope of this fraud extends far beyond Harrison Industries, Agent Santos explained. Bradley Harrison was part of a network of corporate insiders selling confidential information to multiple companies across 3 states. My heart sank as I realized how much larger this conspiracy was than we had imagined. Through Bradley's email communications, we have identified at least 8 other individuals at different companies who were selling corporate secrets to the same group of buyers. Agent Santos continued. Your investigation helped us uncover a major industrial espionage network. The media attention began almost immediately. Local news stations picked up the story of the company owner's son being arrested for corporate fraud. The headlines were brutal, heir apparent steals from family business, and privileged son's greed destroys father's legacy. Frank was devastated by the public attention, but handled interviews with dignity and transparency. My son made choices that violated every value this company stands for, he told reporters. We will cooperate fully with authorities to ensure justice is served. The investigation revealed the full extent of Bradley's crimes. Over 2 years, he had stolen $137,000 through fraudulent expense reports. He had sold confidential information that cost Harrison Industries over $300,000 in lost contracts. His actions had directly led to the termination of 6 other employees who had tried to question his behavior. But the most shocking revelation came when investigators examined Bradley's personal financial records. He had been living far beyond any reasonable means, spending money on luxury apartments, expensive cars, and lavish entertainment that far exceeded his legitimate income. Bradley Harrison was essentially using Harrison Industries as his personal bank account, Agent Santos told the media. He viewed corporate assets as his inheritance and felt entitled to take whatever he wanted. Janet Murphy agreed to testify about Bradley's retaliation against HR investigations. David Kim provided evidence of how Bradley had destroyed his career for asking legitimate questions. Lisa Thompson documented the sophisticated methods Bradley used to hide his fraudulent expense reports. The investigation also revealed that Bradley had attempted to recruit other employees into his schemes. He had approached several younger workers, offering them money to access confidential files or provide information about company operations. He targeted employees who were struggling financially or felt undervalued by management, Agent Santos explained. Classic recruitment tactics for corporate espionage networks. Fortunately, most employees had refused his offers or reported his approaches to management. The few who had provided minimal information became cooperating witnesses in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Frank's response to the crisis impressed everyone involved. Instead of trying to minimize the damage or protect his family's reputation, he implemented comprehensive reforms to prevent future fraud. We are installing new financial oversight systems, mandatory ethics training, and whistleblower protections, Frank announced to the staff. No one, including family members, will have unchecked access to company assets or confidential information. The company's reputation actually improved as clients and competitors recognized Frank's integrity in handling the crisis. Several major contracts that we had lost to competitors were returned when those companies learned they had been won through stolen information. Harrison Industries has shown the kind of ethical leadership that is rare in corporate America, wrote the Cleveland Business Journal. Frank Harrison's willingness to prosecute his own son demonstrates a commitment to integrity over personal loyalty. Meanwhile, Bradley's situation continued to deteriorate. Investigators discovered that he had been planning to flee the country using company funds. His passport showed applications for extended travel visas to countries without extradition treaties. His apartment contained packed suitcases and over $50,000 in cash. Bradley Harrison was preparing to disappear permanently, Agent Santos revealed during a press conference. He had created false identity documents and was planning to establish residence in a jurisdiction where he could not be prosecuted for his crimes. The arrest at the airport made national news. Video footage showed Bradley being led away in handcuffs while attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with falsified documents and over $100,000 in company money. His arrest revealed additional crimes, including identity fraud, money laundering, and attempted flight from prosecution. What had started as corporate theft had escalated into federal crimes carrying potential sentences of over 20 years. Frank struggled with intense guilt and grief throughout the investigation. I enabled his behavior by making excuses and refusing to hold him accountable, he told me during one of our private conversations. I thought I was protecting him, but I was actually enabling him to hurt innocent people. The psychological impact on Frank was severe, but he sought counseling and threw himself into rebuilding the company culture. He promoted Tom Rodriguez to Chief Operating Officer and gave me expanded responsibilities as Vice President of Marketing and Operations. I need leaders who will tell me the truth, even when it is difficult, Frank said during my promotion ceremony. Victoria risked her career to protect this company, and that kind of integrity deserves recognition and responsibility. The federal case against Bradley was ironclad, with over 200 pieces of evidence and testimony from dozens of witnesses. Prosecutors felt confident pursuing maximum sentences. This is not a case about youthful mistakes or poor judgment, the federal prosecutor announced. This is a case about systematic criminal behavior by someone who felt entitled to steal from his own family and destroy other people's livelihoods. Bradley's expensive lawyers attempted various defense strategies. They claimed he was mentally unstable. They blamed Frank's parenting. They argued he was just trying to help the company modernize. Nothing worked. The evidence was too comprehensive, the crimes too extensive, and the damage too real for any defense strategy to succeed. Justice was approaching, and everyone involved knew Bradley would face serious consequences for his choices. 6 months after Bradley's arrest, his federal trial began in the U.S. District Court in Cleveland. The case had attracted significant media attention as a symbol of corporate accountability and the consequences of privileged entitlement. Bradley's defense team, led by expensive white-collar criminal attorneys, attempted to portray him as a misguided young man who had made poor decisions under pressure from family expectations. The strategy was deeply offensive to everyone who knew the truth. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Bradley's lead attorney argued during opening statements, "you will hear about a young man who grew up in the shadow of a successful father's business empire. The pressure to prove himself led to increasingly desperate attempts to demonstrate his value to the company." The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez, presented a very different narrative. The evidence will show that Bradley Harrison was not a desperate son seeking approval. He was a calculating criminal who systematically stole from his father's company while destroying the careers of honest employees who tried to stop him. I was the prosecution's first witness. Walking into the federal courthouse felt surreal, but I was determined to tell the truth about Bradley's crimes and their impact on real people. "Ms. Victoria, please tell the court about your role at Harrison Industries," Attorney Martinez began. I explained my 3-year history with the company, my promotion to marketing director, and the success of campaigns that had increased revenue by 68%. The jury listened intently as I described building something meaningful that Bradley had tried to destroy. "Can you describe your first significant conflict with the defendant?" I recounted Bradley's demand that I cancel successful advertising campaigns to fund his influencer marketing schemes. The jury's expressions showed they understood how unreasonable his demands had been. "How did the defendant react when you explained why his marketing strategy would not work for your business?" "He became increasingly aggressive and threatening. He told me that I worked for his family and should follow his orders without question." Attorney Martinez presented the doctored recording Bradley had made of our conversation. Then she played the complete conversation that Amanda had secretly recorded, showing the context that Bradley had deliberately edited out. The contrast was devastating. Bradley's edited version made me sound insubordinate. The complete recording revealed his threats, unreasonable demands, and obvious intent to frame me. "How did you feel when you learned the defendant had deliberately misrepresented your conversation to his father?" "Betrayed and frightened," I answered honestly. I realized he was willing to destroy my career to protect his own interests. The prosecution then presented our evidence chronologically. Amanda testified about Bradley's unauthorized access to confidential files. Tom explained the fraudulent expense reports and their impact on company finances. Lisa demonstrated how Bradley had hidden his theft through sophisticated accounting manipulations. Each witness described not just Bradley's crimes but their personal impact. David Kim testified about losing $15,000 in annual salary when Bradley retaliated against his questions about expense reports. "I have 3 children and a mortgage," David said, his voice breaking slightly. "That lost income meant canceling my daughter's college plans and taking a second job to pay our bills." Janet Murphy described the hostile work environment Bradley created for anyone who questioned his behavior. "He made it clear that challenging him would result in termination," Janet testified. "Employees were afraid to do their jobs because they knew Bradley would retaliate against anyone who inconvenienced him." The prosecution presented evidence of Bradley's luxury lifestyle funded by stolen money. Credit card statements for designer clothes, exotic vacations, expensive cars, and lavish entertainment. Bank records showing payments from competing companies for confidential Harrison Industries information. The defendant spent more on a single weekend vacation than many of his father's employees earn in 3 months, Attorney Martinez pointed out. He funded this lifestyle by stealing from the company and selling out his father's business to competitors. Bradley's defense tried to present character witnesses, but most potential supporters refused to testify. His college friends distanced themselves from him. His former girlfriends wanted nothing to do with the case. Even relatives declined to support his defense. The few witnesses who did testify for Bradley actually hurt his case. His former college roommate revealed that Bradley had bragged about his schemes during school. Bradley used to say that his father was too trusting and that the business would eventually be his anyway. The roommate testified under cross-examination. He called the company employees a bunch of losers who were easy to manipulate. Another defense witness, a former classmate, inadvertently revealed Bradley's true character. Bradley always said that rules were for other people, the witness admitted. He felt like his family's money meant he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. The prosecution's final witness was Frank Harrison himself. Watching a father testify against his own son was heartbreaking, but Frank's testimony was powerful and honest. "Bradley is my son, and I love him," Frank said, his voice steady but emotional. But love cannot excuse criminal behavior or the harm he caused to innocent people. Frank described the financial damage Bradley's crimes had caused to the company, the employee terminations that resulted from lost contracts, and the personal betrayal of watching his son destroy everything Frank had built. "Did you enable the defendant's behavior?" Attorney Martinez asked directly. "Yes, I did," Frank admitted. "I made excuses for him when I should have held him accountable. I ignored warning signs because I wanted to believe he would eventually mature. My failure as a father does not excuse his crimes, but it contributed to the harm he was able to cause." Bradley's defense presented character evidence and psychological testimony claiming he suffered from various mental health issues. The strategy backfired when prosecutors revealed that Bradley had never sought mental health treatment and had shown no signs of impairment when planning his complex fraud schemes. If the defendant was suffering from mental health issues that impaired his judgment, Attorney Martinez argued, how was he able to create sophisticated methods to hide his crimes? How was he able to recruit accomplices and plan his escape from prosecution? The defense's closing argument was desperate and unconvincing. They asked the jury to consider Bradley's youth, his family pressure, and his alleged mental health issues as mitigating factors. The prosecution's closing was devastating and comprehensive. Bradley Harrison stole $137,000 from his father's company. He sold confidential information that cost Harrison Industries over $300,000 in lost business. He destroyed the careers of honest employees who tried to protect the company from his crimes. Attorney Martinez continued, "This was not a young man making mistakes under pressure. This was a calculating criminal who felt entitled to steal from his own family while destroying other people's livelihoods." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges: wire fraud, money laundering, corporate espionage, identity fraud, and attempted flight from prosecution. Bradley showed no emotion when the verdicts were read. His expensive lawyers had prepared him for this outcome. At sentencing 3 weeks later, the judge delivered a harsh but fair punishment. "Mr. Harrison, your crimes represent a profound betrayal of family trust and corporate responsibility," Judge Patricia Williams said. "You used your privileged position to steal from your father's company while systematically destroying the careers of employees who tried to stop you." Bradley was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison plus full restitution of $325,000 to Harrison Industries and affected employees. The judge also imposed 5 years of supervised probation after his release. "This sentence reflects the seriousness of your crimes and the need to deter others who might consider similar behavior," Judge Williams continued. "Privilege and family connections do not exempt anyone from accountability for criminal conduct." As Bradley was led away in handcuffs, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost to Frank and the company had been enormous. The trial was over, but the real work of rebuilding was just beginning. 2 years have passed since Bradley's conviction, and the transformation at Harrison Industries has been remarkable. What began as a crisis that threatened to destroy a family business evolved into an opportunity to build something stronger and more ethical than anyone had imagined. Frank emerged from his darkest period as a more thoughtful and effective leader. The guilt and grief of prosecuting his own son never fully disappeared, but he channeled those emotions into creating a company culture that prioritized integrity above everything else. I failed as a father by enabling Bradley's behavior, Frank told me during one of our weekly leadership meetings, but I refused to fail as a leader by allowing that kind of corruption to ever happen again. Frank implemented comprehensive reforms that became a model for other companies. Mandatory ethics training, financial oversight systems, whistleblower protections, and psychological support for employees who report misconduct. He also established an independent board of directors to provide external oversight of all major business decisions. The company's financial performance exceeded all expectations. Once clients and competitors learned that Harrison Industries was committed to absolute transparency and ethical behavior, our business grew dramatically. Revenue increased by 90% over 18 months, and we hired 43 new employees to handle expanded operations. My own career flourished beyond anything I had imagined when I first challenged Bradley's corruption. Frank promoted me to Vice President of Marketing and Operations, with expanded responsibilities for strategic planning and business development. The skills I developed during our investigation, particularly attention to detail and ethical decision-making, served me well in leadership roles. Sarah became my assistant director of marketing, and together we built campaigns that emphasized Harrison Industries' commitment to integrity and accountability. Our Built on Trust marketing theme resonated powerfully with clients who were tired of dealing with companies that prioritized profits over principles. Tom Rodriguez's promotion to Chief Operating Officer gave him the authority he needed to implement financial controls that prevented future fraud. His integrity during the Bradley crisis earned him respect throughout the company and the broader business community. Amanda Foster received recognition from the FBI for her digital forensics work and was promoted to Director of Information Security. Her expertise became invaluable as companies across the region sought her advice on protecting confidential information. The other employees who had suffered under Bradley's retaliation were vindicated and rewarded. David Kim was promoted to Regional Sales Director with a salary increase that more than compensated for his previous demotion. Janet Murphy returned as Senior HR Director, implementing policies that protected employees from management retaliation. Frank's personal journey was perhaps the most profound transformation of all. He sought therapy to understand how his parenting had enabled Bradley's destructive behavior, and he became an advocate for corporate accountability and ethical leadership. I thought protecting Bradley from consequences was loving parenting, Frank reflected during a business ethics conference where he was the keynote speaker. I learned too late that real love requires holding people accountable for their choices. Frank established the Harrison Foundation for Business Ethics, using his personal resources to fund research and education about corporate responsibility. The foundation provided scholarships for business students who demonstrated exceptional integrity and awarded grants to companies implementing innovative ethics programs. Bradley's experience in federal prison was difficult, but ultimately transformative. Cut off from his privileged lifestyle and forced to face the consequences of his actions, he slowly began to understand the impact of his crimes on real people. His first letter to me arrived 14 months after his conviction. It was handwritten, thoughtful, and genuinely remorseful. "Victoria, I know that an apology cannot undo the harm I caused to you and so many other people," Bradley wrote. I spent years believing that I was entitled to whatever I wanted without considering how my actions affected others. Prison has given me time to understand how selfish and destructive my behavior was. Bradley's letters to his father were even more heartbreaking and honest. Dad, I destroyed the relationship with the person who loved me most in the world, Bradley wrote to Frank. I betrayed your trust, damaged your business, and hurt innocent people who were just trying to do their jobs. I understand why you had to prosecute me, and I respect you for choosing justice over family loyalty. Frank visited Bradley in prison every month, and slowly they began rebuilding their relationship based on honesty rather than enablement. Bradley is finally taking responsibility for his choices, Frank told me after one of these visits. It took losing everything for him to understand that actions have consequences. The media attention surrounding our case inspired other companies to examine their own ethical practices. The Cleveland Business Journal published a special issue about corporate accountability featuring Harrison Industries as an example of how transparency and integrity could actually strengthen business performance. I began speaking at business conferences about the importance of ethical leadership and the courage required to challenge corruption. My story resonated with employees across various industries who had witnessed misconduct but were afraid to report it. Challenging corruption is never easy, I told audiences. But protecting integrity is always worth the personal risk. Companies succeed when they prioritize principles over profits. The professional recognition was gratifying, but the personal satisfaction was even more meaningful. I had proven to myself that standing up for what was right, even when it threatened my career, was the kind of person I wanted to be. Frank offered me equity in Harrison Industries and a position on the board of directors. This company exists today because you had the courage to fight for its integrity, he said. You should have ownership in what you helped save. Looking back on the entire experience, I realized that Bradley's attempt to destroy my career actually created opportunities I never could have imagined. By forcing me to document his corruption, he inadvertently gave me the skills and credibility that accelerated my professional growth. The deeper lesson was about the power of preparation and persistence. When Bradley first threatened me, I could have accepted defeat or looked for another job. Instead, I chose to systematically gather evidence and build a case for justice. Evil succeeds when good people do nothing, I learned from a quote by Edmund Burke. But I also learned that good people can triumph over corruption when they are willing to work together. Document everything and persist despite intimidation. The transformation of Harrison Industries proved that companies can emerge stronger from ethical crises if leaders choose transparency over cover-ups and accountability over loyalty. Frank's willingness to prosecute his own son sent a powerful message throughout the business community. No one is above the law, and integrity matters more than family connections or financial considerations. 3 months ago, Bradley was granted early release consideration based on his exemplary behavior and completion of business ethics education programs. Frank supported his application, but made it clear that Bradley would need to earn trust through actions, not words. Forgiveness is possible, Frank told me, but Bradley will never work for Harrison Industries again. Some boundaries cannot be crossed twice. The company Frank built survived its greatest crisis and emerged as a model for ethical business practices. The employees who suffered under Bradley's retaliation were vindicated and rewarded. The justice system held a privileged criminal accountable for his choices. Most importantly, I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to do what is right despite being afraid. When Bradley first threatened my career, I was terrified of losing everything I had worked for. But I discovered that protecting my integrity was more important than protecting my comfort. The story that began with a spoiled son's attempt to destroy my career ended with justice redemption and a company culture built on principles that will protect future generations of employees. Sometimes the darkest moments in our lives become the foundations for our greatest victories. Bradley's corruption nearly destroyed Harrison Industries, but our response to his crimes created something better than what existed before. That is the power of choosing integrity over convenience, courage over comfort, and justice over personal loyalty. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what was right felt impossible because of the personal risk involved? How did you find the courage to challenge corruption or injustice when it seemed like speaking up might cost you everything? I would love to hear your stories about finding the strength to fight for integrity even when the odds seemed overwhelming. If this story inspired you to think differently about workplace ethics or personal courage, please like this video to let me know it made an impact. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people who chose to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult and dangerous. Share this with anyone who might be facing their own ethical challenges and needs inspiration to do the right thing. Thank you for listening to my story and for caring about integrity in your own life and work. I hope it encourages you to remember that good people can triumph over corruption when they are willing to work together and never give up on justice. Until next time, keep fighting for what is right.